All right. Good evening. Hello, everyone. I am so excited for you to be here with us for this masterclass. We have over 1,300 people registered. Amazing. And we're going to have such an incredible night. So I'm Dr. Sharon Horesh Bergquist. I'm a physician and scientist, and my research and clinical practice are on how we can use our lifestyle as our most potent form of medicine. And I'm the author of The Stress Paradox: How You Can Use Stress to Live Longer, Healthier, and Happier. And guys, this book I've poured my heart into. It really brings together everything I know about how to use our body's natural ability to heal itself down to the level of our cells, how we can regenerate our bodies to live our healthiest life. And I'm so excited to share bits of it with you. And if you order now for this week before it becomes available, you get all the pre-order bonuses. So I've created this really comprehensive workbook, a little sheet you can take to help guide your next conversation with your physician, and a live webinar where we can dive deeper into this topic. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into some housekeeping items. So I'm joined tonight by some colleagues who I have nothing but tremendous respect for. You're going to love them if you don't already know them. And we're going to do 3 interviews. We're going to then have a live demo for a meal prep. And then we're going to do 3 more interviews. And then Sam Cutler and I are going to be available at the end to answer all the questions. So as we're going along, please put your questions into the chat. We're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can. And most of all, I hope that you get a lot of value out of being with us tonight. And more than anything, I really hope that you walk away with some tools that you can begin applying to live your healthiest and best life. So we're going to kick off tonight with Dr. Robynne Chutkan. And so, Dr. Robynne Chutkan is an integrative gastroenterologist, and she's the author of digestive health books Gut Bliss, The Microbiome Solution, The Bloat Cure, and The Antiviral Gut. She's also the host of the Gut Bliss podcast. She received her bachelor's from Yale University, her medical degree from Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons, where she also did her internship and residency. And she did her fellowship in gastroenterology at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. Dr. Chutkan is the founder of Digestive Center for Wellness, an integrative gastroenterology practice dedicated to uncovering the root cause of GI disorders. Hi, Robynne. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so thrilled to be participating in this masterclass.
So, Robynne, my patients often ask me how they can improve their immune system, and you literally wrote the book with the antiviral gut. Can you tell us what is the gut immune connection, and what is the role of our immune system in prevention?
Sharon, part of why I really wanted to write that book is because people know that the gut is your largest digestive organ, right? When people think of the GI tract, it's like, of course, we digest food. That's what the gut does. But people don't realize that the gut is also our largest defensive organ. So our gut isn't just digesting food and making sure that those nutrients get to the appropriate organs and cells. It is also protecting us. And how does it do that? Well, 70% of our immune system is actually physically located in our gut. And if you're like me in medical school, do you remember when we were learning about the immune system? And it's like, what's that? It was this sort of ethereal concept of like, well, it's like T cells and B cells floating around, and where are they? I think of all the organ systems, like you could understand the kidneys, even though there was some math involved in kidney function, and the lungs and the brain and the gut, but it was like the immune system seemed, it was just sort of hard to pin down, like, where is it even located? Well, it turns out it's mostly in our gut, in the small intestine. And what's really fascinating is that we have these trillions of microbes in our gut, the microbiome. And then you have this very thin lining, the gut wall, that's only 1 cell thick. And on the other side of that, you have most of the immune cells. So the gut kind of ecosystem of gut bacteria, et cetera, are on one side in the gut. And on the other side of this razor thin lining, 1 cell thick, are all the immune cells, and they are in constant communication. So I like to describe it as a hand and glove situation. And so what happens, for example, is that the microbes in the gut lumen, they are looking out for things, for like Ebola and SARS-CoV-2 and toxins and bad characters. And when they see something that they want the immune system to react to, they literally, in some instances, like with one gut bacteria, Bacteroides fragilis, they kick the wall of the gut, that thin 1 cell lining, to activate the immune system to say, hey, do something. There's like a really bad character here, whether it's to start making cytokines or antibodies or whatever it is. So the gut microbes are like a lookout, and there's this constant interaction. So therefore, that means that the health of your microbiome is vitally important, because if you don't have sufficient gut species to do all this monitoring, your immune system may not be activated, or even worse, sometimes it may be overactivated. And if your gut lining isn't healthy, if you're taking lots of nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or you're drinking lots of alcohol, eating highly processed food, you're going to have some damage to your gut lining. And then that interaction is also going to be interrupted. So one of the things with the book that was really exciting for me was to introduce people to this concept of our GI tract as a major defensive organ.
Yeah. And what is the link between the health of the immune system of the gut and disease?
Well, when we think about autoimmune diseases, the list when I was in medical school, I think was maybe 30 or 40 diseases, and now there are over 100. Not to date myself, but so we have over 100 different autoimmune diseases. We know that about 1 in 4 Americans have an autoimmune disease. Some people have several. So some people may have eczema, plus Crohn's, plus Raynaud's or diabetes. And really what an autoimmune disease is an overreaction of the immune system to an internal stimulus. So an overreactive immune system to an external stimulus would be like allergies to a bee sting or wasp sting or pollen. So you have an external trigger, pollen, bee sting, and your immune system overreacts and you have an allergic response. But autoimmune diseases are overreactions to our own internal organs. So in the case of an autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis, our own body is destroying our joints. In the case of the diseases I treat, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, our gut is destroying its own lining. It's ulcerating, it's developing strictures, etc. And again, these diseases are incredibly common. And so what's causing this overreaction? And a lot of that has to do with the health of the gut microbiome, because a lot of the regulation of the immune system is done through byproducts in the gut. For example, there is a bacteria, my favorite bacteria, it's only one of many that does it, but Faecalibacterium prosnitzii, F. prosnitzii for short. When you eat fiber, that is fermented by F. prosnitzii to short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are essential for regulating that immune system, for creating what I like to call the Goldilocks immune response. It's not so underactive that you don't clear the infection, but it's not so overactive that you end up with an autoimmune disease. And so if you don't have enough short-chain fatty acids, you are probably going to end up with immune dysregulation, either an immune system that's not strong enough to protect you from illness or to help you recover quickly, or an immune system that's overreactive and you're going to end up with autoimmune disease. And there have been some fascinating studies, one of them during COVID, and this is a study that was done at UMass Amherst. It showed that the composition of the gut microbiome was the most accurate predictor of COVID outcome. It could predict with 92% accuracy who would end up dying from COVID or on a ventilator. And what was that correlated to? It wasn't age or whether you also had lung disease or cancer. It wasn't what your inflammatory markers were in your blood. It was the relative amount of F. prosnitzii you had in your stool sample.
Just fascinating.
Yeah, and you can't just go and buy that. You can't just, I'll just go buy some F. prosnitzii probiotics, or I'll buy some short-chain fatty acids. It doesn't work that way, because when you were taking something externally like that, if you were not feeding the microbes what they want to be eating, which is ideally a lot of fiber, you're not going to get meaningful repopulation and colonization, and it's not going to increase your amount of short chain fatty acids. So, it's one of the, like, this is not something you just go out and hack and buy at the health food store.
And Robynne, one of the things I love about your work as an integrative gastroenterologist is you look at every component of lifestyle and how it impacts the gut microbiome. So, of course, food always gets the center stage, but exercise and stress are all factors. What is the connection between exercise and microbial diversity?
We have some direct evidence that exercise benefits diversity in the gut. There are studies from the British Journal of Sports Medicine showing that avid exercisers, that study in particular looked at rugby players, and it compared rugby players, not a sport that's super popular in the US, but rugby players, and it looked at age-matched pairs, and it found that rugby players who were exercising avidly 5 days a week had vastly superior diversity. They had more gut diversity. They had more healthy species. There have been several other studies looking at that. So there are a couple things, but one of the things I want people to think about is just gut peristalsis. The GI tract is muscle. It's smooth muscle. It's different from the muscle of the biceps or so on, which is skeletal muscle, but it is muscle nonetheless. And in order to maintain that balance of the microbiome from north to south, so as we go from our mouth at the top of the GI tract all the way down to our anus at the bottom, the amount of bacteria increase. And that is a normal, natural gradient. We're supposed to have a lot of bacteria in the colon and not a lot in the stomach. And what helps to maintain that gradient is gut peristalsis. It's the movement of that smooth muscle in the gut. And what stimulates that? Exercise. And some of the pathways involve nitric oxide, the same pathways that help to keep our arteries healthy in our heart. There are various pathways, some of them complicated, some not so complicated, but just from a mechanical point of view, peristalsis is critically important to moving those bacteria through. And so you don't develop stasis, not just of intestinal contents, but of microbes that should be moving through and recycling. And so when we look at a condition like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is just a form of dysbiosis, of bacterial imbalance, we know that exercise is profoundly helpful for that condition. And that when we look at some of our more sedentary patients, for example, people in a nursing home, we know that not only are they constipated and bloated as you would expect, but they tend to have a really disrupted microbiome. So we have lots of studies. We have in vitro studies. We have in vivo studies. We have clinical studies showing that exercise is really key.
Yeah, and you mentioned the study with rugby players, but how about other types of exercise? Like, is there a regimen you recommend for your patients for gut health?
It's such a great question. I think the most effective exercise is the one you like to do and the one you're actually going to do. And so that can take a lot of different forms. A lot of the studies have been done looking at kind of rebounding, bouncing type exercises. So running, trampolining, horseback riding, things like that. But even a brisk walk. So typically anything that's really getting your heart rate up to about 10 to 20% of your resting baseline, 30 minutes minimum, ideally, and 5 days a week or more. I personally try and shoot for an hour, 6 days a week. And that takes various forms. I'm a runner. I'm slow, but I can go far. I like to lift and do CrossFit. I like to do yoga. I play squash. I'll swim if there's an ocean available. So for me, having a variety of things really sort of keeps me engaged. And I sort of see it as play. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's time to make the roses. Time to make the donuts. How does that saying go? Yeah. Sometimes, although not donuts for a healthy gut microbiome, sometimes it is sort of like, oh, I've got to do something. But mostly it is like, oh, I get to do this thing. I get to go to my favorite yoga studio and practice. I get to go and try and beat my friend Rachel at squash, whatever it is. And I think that's really important for people, that there is some sort of joy and joyful anticipation. I've had exercise places. I used to go to an exercise place and I would be driving there kind of trembling like this is going to suck. And I just stopped going. I was like, you know what? You don't even have to go. So if you can combine the joyful anticipation with exercise. If you can combine a type of exercise that's also helping to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, and for me, that's yoga, even though I do a fairly active form of vinyasa yoga. That is also really helpful. Some people find, the running is really helpful for them. The brisk walking, whatever it is, if you're also getting a mental component from it, then I think it's really a twofer.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it sounds like good stress.
It's good stress. When you talk about good stress, and I watched that lovely segment you did on the local news, it makes me think of Congressman Lewis, the good trouble. Yeah, it's a very positive association.
Yeah. And Robyn, in your books, you explain that you can go to the gym, like you just described, go to the yoga class, you can eat plants, but if your heart and your head are not in the right place, you can still get dysbiosis. So in your experience working with patients, what have you seen as the role of chronic stress on the gut, and what is your advice for managing it?
Sharon, I don't think it is an overstatement when I tell you that I think chronic stress is responsible for maybe the majority of gut problems I see. Because it's often that compounded with something else. But the chronic stress is then leading to a poor food choice. It's leading to, I don't have time to exercise. It's leading to, there's no time for leisure and relaxation and joyful anticipation. So people are like this. About whatever it is. I have to pick up my kid. I have to, whatever it is that they are so tense about is going to exacerbate whatever's already going on in their gut. And sometimes it's responsible for what's going on in their gut. There have been several studies, but there was a classic one that was done in college students. And they looked at college students during exam time. And now that's both an acute and chronic stress, right? Because you're sitting for the exam, that's acute, but the exams are coming like all semester. And they found that kind of prolonged stress over the exam period could increase levels of pathogenic bacteria 1,000-fold. Isn't that crazy? And so when we think about it, it's like, oh yeah, why do all the college kids get mono during exam time? So they're sleep deprived, they're eating crappy food, and they're stressed out. And it's like the trifecta of, why they get sick. Think about latent viruses like herpes virus and chickenpox varicella that causes measles, and EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, that causes mono. Many people have had these things and they are latent. But when do we get shingles? When we're stressed. When do we get the mono gets reactivated? When we're stressed. When do we get an outbreak of herpes? When we're stressed. So it is a clear indicator that when you are stressed in that chronic way, your immune system is not able to defend you, even from things that it's been, you had this virus, you recovered, it's there latent in your body, but all of a sudden you're having a manifestation of it, an outbreak. And it is because of this tie between stress and the immune system. So I'm always telling people, this stuff is not just in your head, it is also in your body. And it is affecting blood pressure and the health of our hearts and our thyroid function and our gut function and our immune function. And so what I love about your book is you're not just saying, well, sucks to be you, stressed out. You're saying, look, you can take these things and you can actually use them to your advantage. You can create an adaptive advantage and a strategy by understanding the difference between acute and chronic and good and bad, and really thinking about your response to it. One of my favorite studies that I looked at when I was writing the book, the last book, The Antiviral Gut, was a study from University of North Carolina. And they looked at men with HIV. And they found the progression with HIV to AIDS was double for the men who did not have some kind of stress mitigation strategy. So it's not the presence of stress. It's what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And I spent so much of my career telling people about the harm, and that just got them more stressed. So the book, the goal, of course, is, well, what's the solution? And I think building that resilience even through stress, which, again, is so
Yes.
counterintuitive, is so powerful. Well, Robynne, thank you so much for all this great information. It's been an absolute pleasure and incredible hearing just the far-reaching effects and the extension, like you said, of autoimmune diseases to things like eczema, things that we don't even commonly think about, but the scope of the impact of gut health and keeping the gut healthy just is so far-reaching. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And I just want to tell everyone out there, when Sharon reached out to me about the book, before I blurb any book, give an endorsement, I always read at least half of the book. And in this case, I read the whole book. And I remember, I think I either emailed or I called you or I texted you. And I was like, this book is fantastic. This is such a great book. And I have to tell you, I'm so honored to be a part of this movement to really get the book out and get the word out, because it is not just filled with, great information that is scientifically validated, but it's filled with actionable information and just small things that you can do on a daily basis that are really going to make a difference, a significant difference. Like, you may still be exposed to a virus, but you may have a great recovery and hardly be sick. You may be able to get your autoimmune disease under control without a biologic. I mean, these are real tangible differences that this book can make. So I just want to thank you for writing it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for saying that. Thanks so much.
All true.
Hi, Robynne. It's all right. That was an amazing way to get started. Love Robynne. So a couple take homes that I got from that. So the gut, thinking about it as a defensive organ, which I think is so powerful. And how our microbes are lookout officers, and we want this Goldilocks balance in our immune system, where our immune system is strong enough to fight infection, but not overreacting to develop these autoimmune conditions. One thing that I thought was really critical is we talk so much about a balance in our gut microbiome, but Robynne also added that where our gut microbes are located is so important. This gradient from our stomach all the way down to the very distal end of our GI tract, and that exercise helps get the right gradient of gut bacteria. So that is such an important takeaway of the role of exercise in our gut health. And as she recommended, trying to get 10 to 20% above your basal heart rate. And lastly, so powerful about her talking about chronic stress and gut health. Truly, in my practice, it's such a big part of a lot of conditions I see. In fact, most conditions I see. And that's one of the reasons I was so compelled to write about it, because taking action is one of our best defenses to building resilience and dealing with anxiety. And as Robynne called it, it's an adaptive advantage when you kind of take on some challenges and develop that resilience. And it's just such a big part of our health. So I'm going to jump into introducing our next guest. And the next topic we're going to talk about is heart disease. So heart disease right now is the leading cause of death in this country in men and women. And Dr. Jonathan Fisher is a cardiologist who focuses on healing the heart in the broadest sense. It encompasses both the physical and emotional aspects of cardiac care. He received his education at Harvard. In fact, we were actually both in residency together at Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital, really at the same time, same residency director. It's such a small world. And he later went on to Mount Sinai. He's also a mindfulness meditation teacher, an organizational well-being leader, and the author of Just One Heart, a cardiologist's guide to healing, health, and happiness. And here's our conversation. Jonathan, welcome to the Masterclass.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm so excited to be with you and to chat with you about these topics that we're so passionate about.
And I'm so excited to have you because heart disease is the leading cause of death in this country. And most often, I think most of the patients you see already have heart disease, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? We're all here to focus on prevention and what we can do through maybe less traditional approaches than traditional healthcare, right? Can you talk about, first of all, the standard of care right now is that you see most people who have heart disease. That's right?
So it is. The trend is shifting now. It used to be, if it was 20 years ago, the vast majority, I would say more than 80% of patients would have already had a heart attack, already had high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. Nowadays, we're starting to get the message out. And so I'm seeing a higher percentage of people who come to me for what we might call primary prevention or primordial prevention. But these are people who often have one risk factor, and it's usually a father or a mother who had heart disease, and this person is living in fear, and they want to do everything possible to prevent their ever having a heart issue.
Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful. And what does prevention for heart disease look like in a broader sense?
Well, first, the word prevention is something that it never sits quite right for me, because even the word prevention sets our mind in motion about the future and something potentially bad going to happen. Prevent what? Prevent disease. And I know how important it is to youth. The way we think about stress affects our experience of stress. So I want to talk about prevention with the caveat that I prefer thinking about optimizing our lives, living a long, healthy, loving, full life. Whereas if we're focused only on that idea of prevention, there's something in danger in the future coming at us. Now, with that nuance added, I'm really happy that the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, Dr. Ornish, who was a pioneer in that field, has done such good work in developing these pillars of how we can keep our body healthy. And what we're finding out is that prevention of heart disease is not different than prevention of brain disease, and it's not different than prevention of gut disease. So I also want to add that piece that even though I'm a cardiologist and a specialist, we have to stop thinking only as specialists. That model of healthcare is broken. We all have to be courageous enough to put out our hands to generalists and specialists and even cross that line between psychology and our specialty. So I'm a psychocardiologist, which sounds weird, but for me, prevention is about optimizing our lives by making sure we take care of the physical heart, which means proper rest and sleep, nutrition, exercise, movement, the emotional dimension of the heart, which is around stress and emotional baggage and working through things and not holding on to them. And then there's the social heart, which is the third dimension. We have to have strong relationships that we invest our time and attention into. That's the number one predictor of heart health and longevity in general. And lastly, what I consider the spiritual heart, or the spiritual dimension of being human. And I don't mean religious. I'm talking about going beyond our narrow self-concern and connecting with something bigger. It's usually a sense of purpose or service that we know. A purposeful heart is a healthy heart. So that's how I think about prevention.
You know, those are really words that are music to my ears, because being an internist, and I do think about what can we do to make the whole body healthy. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Your term, psychocardiologist, that really struck with me, because you speak so much about the connection between the heart and the mind. Can you explain that connection?
So this is another situation where, since I know this is a very an educated audience who wants to think about things in interesting details, I'm going to talk about the mind-heart connection for just a minute. But I want to say that even the word connection does us a disservice, because the word connection suggests that there's areas where they're not connected. And everything that happens in the heart sends signals and information to the mind every second of the day. In fact, there's more information flowing through the vagus nerve and other pathways from the heart itself back to the brain. It talks about our state of threat, our state of safety, our state of health, our state of dis-ease. And there's also a communication from the mind down to the heart by three interesting pathways. So the point is that there is a connection, but there's really no separation at all. The only separation is that we in medicine take a very fragmented approach. And if you have chest pain, you are sent to a heart doctor. 80% of my patients with chest pain have some element coming from the mind, making the pain either worse or last longer, or lead to anxiety or even depression and chronic fear. So this mind-heart connection is something that humans have known about for thousands of years. It's part of every wisdom tradition, religious tradition, any timeless tradition in the world knows that the mind and heart are constantly talking to each other. And simply put, it means that our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs have a direct and meaningful impact on our physical heart itself and the health of the rest of our body.
Yeah, I love that you point that out because, obviously writing the stress paradox, this connection between our mind and body is such an integral part of the book, and how we kind of start at that foundational level of our cells and how they really all converge at kind of biochemically, on these foundational parts that control every organ system. Now, one of the common themes about what makes stress good in heart integrity is aligning your daily actions with your values. Can you talk more about heart integrity?
Absolutely. So integrity means unified, it means aligned, it means that when we say one thing, we act in that way. And the heart itself can feel when we're acting out of integrity, when we're, let's say, preaching the benefits of social connection, but we haven't called a loved one in 2 weeks, when we're talking about the importance of rest and we're running around ragged, writing books and giving talks and not taking care of ourselves. The heart can feel the difference. It eventually is in a state of activation. The blood pressure is up, the heart rate is up, the cortisol is up. And so living in integrity means not thinking about our heart in isolation, but thinking about the heart as it connects to every organ in the body. It's in a position of service, but it also, integrity of the heart, just like integrity in our lives, means we have to take care of ourselves. The heart knows this, so that the first 5% of every heartbeat goes back to the heart, down the coronary arteries, giving the heart itself oxygen so that it can then be of service to others. So for me, integrity has to do with caring for ourselves and also committing to something much bigger than ourselves, caring for others.
Amazing. And, one of the things that you've said that has really struck with me is, I'm going to quote you, "I took care of 20,000 other hearts before taking care of my own." And I know you speak personally and professionally. What are 3 things that we can do starting today to heal our hearts?
So the first is to do what we forget to do. And I'm going to make it easy. Since in medical school, I always would try to memorize lists, long lists, and I know you did too. And finding mnemonics and easy ways to remember was helpful for me. So for me, I just think about, well, what does the heart do that I'm not doing? The first thing is the heart beats 100,000 times a day, but it also rests 100,000 times a day. After every systole, there is a diastole. So the first thing that people can do is remember to honor that period of diastole that's so necessary and so often forgotten. Now, what that means is taking a micro break. If you're a doctor or a nurse, between one patient and the next. If you're a mother or a father, it's giving yourself some time to yourself just to rest for 3 minutes and take some nice, deep, diaphragmatic breaths to activate the vagus nerve and calm the nervous system. So number 1 is to honor diastole. Number 2 is related to that, and to be like the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries, as we discussed, they nurture themselves. Those of us in the giving and serving and healing professions are so committed to other people that it's normal and common for us to become martyrs and pleasers of other people. So the second thing is to remember to put on your calendar 1 thing or 2 or 3 things each day that you are going to commit to care for yourself. It may be going for a walk, spending time at the gym, calling a loved one, taking a warm bath, meditating, whatever it is. What are you doing for self-care? And the third thing is remembering that the heart itself survives as a function of its service to the rest of the body. And that's when the heart is happiest. And it's the same thing with humans. Time and time again, research shows that the happiest humans are those that serve others with empathy, compassion, and love. So find one thing today or this week that you can do to connect and to help another person. Maybe a really simple act of kindness. Maybe paying for somebody's coffee at Starbucks before they go through, whatever it is. Those would be the 3 things that I would suggest to get started.
I love those 3 things. And, I'm the concept of, first of all, I love this, take time to recover the diastole, right? Because the good stress is really stress recovery. It's brief. And when you take that time to recover, that's how you grow. That's how you strengthen. So I love that. When we do things for other people, what does that do to our stress level?
When we serve other people, even when we think positively about other people, not even doing anything, but if I think about you, Sharon, and I think, Sharon is wonderful. She's a human being just like me. She's really wanting to help other people understand the stress paradox and how they can live better lives. As I'm having that thought, my worries are going away. My resentment and frustration about what happened yesterday is a thing of the past. I'm in this moment thinking about you. And my own narrow self-concern, my own anxieties about my own health and my own future have suddenly vanished because I've now shifted my focus outward to you and to another person. So my cortisol has just gone down, my oxytocin has just gone up, and my serotonin may be creeping up as well. My blood pressure is certainly lower. All started by a simple thought about another person and sending someone else positive wishes. Imagine what happens when we act on that thought, and when we do that in a community, there's a group effect.
And that's good stress. So I'm so glad you said that. Completely agree. Well, Jonathan, it's been delightful having this conversation, and thank you so much for sharing all that with our group today.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And I have to say, I am so excited about your book. This is amazing. I've started reading it, and I'm getting goosebumps because your approach is so deep on the one hand, but it's so practical on another. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with my patients, with our colleagues. Bravo. Really well done.
Thank you. Really appreciate you saying that, especially from colleagues I respect so much. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharon.
So that was amazing. What I love about Jonathan's approach is he's a cardiologist, but what he's talking about for prevention, this bringing together the physical, the emotional, the social, the spiritual, they're the foundation for preventing all types of disease, not just heart disease. And when we invest our energy in doing this kind of work, we are really helping the foundation of our health. What I thought was so striking was the heart-mind connection and how our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs influence our heart health. So I'm an internal medicine physician. We're trained to check cholesterol. And if it's high, we go down the path of prescribing medications. But this is so powerful to really think about this heart-mind connection and the role our mind plays, even in heart disease. And as Jonathan just said, our heart knows when we're not living in integrity. And this is so huge. When our actions don't align with our beliefs, that creates a state of stress, like chronic stress in our body. And it triggers inflammation because our heart knows that we're essentially lying to ourselves. So this alignment, this integrity is such an important part of heart health and overall health. And I love at the end how he mentioned something that's so counterintuitive. When we're stressed, our instinct is to think about what we need to get done, to kind of focus inward. But as he's saying, if we put some of that energy outward, that it starts to bring down our stress level, which is not something that I think we intuitively do, but it's a really good takeaway. So speaking of mental health and managing stress, The next guest that we're going to have is Dr. Drew Ramsey. He is going to help guide us through mental fitness. So Dr. Drew Ramsey is a board certified psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and author. His work focuses on evidence-based integrative psychiatry, nutritional psychiatry, and male mental health, using a lifestyle approach to anxiety, depression, and feeling more energized and motivated. He is the author of 5 books, including the international bestseller Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. And he is the author of the upcoming book, Healing the Modern Brain, and it's out the same day as The Stress Paradox. So we're book twins. It's an essential guide to mental fitness and psychological resilience that combines the latest scientific research with his 2 decades of experience in clinical practice. Drew, it's wonderful having you.
Sharon, it's so great to be with you. Thanks so much for including me.
Of course. So Drew, conditions like depression, anxiety, ADHD, and addiction, they're often treated as imbalances of brain chemistry, but that's overly simplistic. Can you explain how they're more than that and why we need a more holistic approach?
For sure. I love the idea that there are chemicals in our brain and they really create how we feel. That's how it works. I think what's happened is we've gotten so fixated on a couple of these chemicals like serotonin and dopamine that we've forgotten there are hundreds of molecules that kind of make our human consciousness and our mind. And when we just think about, hey, if I take this medication, I'm going to correct my chemical imbalance and everything will be fine, it oversimplifies things. It doesn't really speak to all of the other things we need to do in our lives when we have mental health concerns. So I find a lot of times in my field, there's like an argument like meds or no meds, and a lot of discussion about whether meds work or not. And when you're a specialist like me, I'm a psychiatrist. I prescribe medications when appropriate pretty much every day. I also do a lot of other things to help my patients get better, besides just medications and psychotherapy, focusing on things like what I'm more known for, like food and helping people think about how they eat and how that influences depression risk. So we're working on creating frameworks and working on creating habits for ourselves that are constantly helping put our brain more into grow and repair mode.
Yeah, and that completely aligns, I think, with the goal of the stress paradox, which is a lot about resilience and fitness and doing it in a very holistic way. So I think that makes complete sense. And I and everyone listening, of course, would love to get your advice on what are actionable things that we can do to improve our brain function and mental health. And in Healing the Modern Brain, you go through the 9 tenets. So let's go through a few of them.
For sure.
Let's talk about crucial nutrients. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just ready to like actionable things. I've got a few ideas for you. So the first tenet is one of self-awareness. And the idea of these tenets is that they're things we can all agree on. Being more self-aware, having a better sense of yourself, that's going to help you in really all arenas of your life. So how do we do that? Well, there's interesting data showing that when we engage in self-reflective processes like journaling, we increase the connectivity and the activity of our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that is involved in reasoning and decision-making. And so I would say that actionable steps that I'm looking for with my patients are things like journaling. I've got some prompts in the book, but I also am a big fan of just putting down more of your inner world on the page. I've been big in my whole career about helping people think about how to tune up their diet in a way that really transcends all the misinformation and wildness of the internet about, what you should eat. It really transcends that confusion and hey, the main problem that most people are struggling with, or a few of the main problems that most people are struggling with, are very clear. Right? We don't eat enough plants. We don't eat enough real food. We don't eat fermented foods. We don't eat seafood. So I have my little rhyme: seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. And so that's an actionable place, again, when it comes to taking control of your mental fitness and building a mental fitness program, that upgrading some knowledge. Right? Most people, when they're eating, they aren't eating with the notion of hey, is this going to help my brain grow? Is this really a nutrient-dense food filled with what I need for my mental health? So I think that's another actionable for sure. And I would say the last one I just want to mention is the tenet of connection. And connection, we know, is so huge. People are really struggling in this loneliness epidemic, a lot of different factors, the pandemic, sort of a digital media existence, just, our social structures eroding, that we don't really kind of get to know our neighbors as much as we used to. So I think working that tenet of connection, actionables, again, simple things, calling a friend. I like sending a picture sometimes, especially if I have one from like way back in the day, if I'm thinking of someone. I'm a big fan of the random phone call. That isn't as effective as it used to be. But connecting with people. In the book, I have an activity asking people to think about their map of connection. We're really getting explicit, not just friends and family, but thinking about like what institutions are you connected to? What are the, who are the mentors you're connected to? Because we know, mental health challenges, one, they make us feel very alone and very separate often. The suffering is often done in silence, and we really want to kind of encourage people to move past that. It's certainly been helpful to me in my own struggles. I've had many moments where I find a lot of solace in understanding, like, I am not the only middle-aged man who has been having these struggling, suffering thoughts. There are a lot of other fellows who've been in this position and gotten through it. And, it's a very different feeling than I'm alone, I'm isolated, I'm unknown, I'm suffering with something that, it needs to be a secret. And so connectivity is just a huge tenet of mental fitness, and particularly, again, the book's healing the modern brain. Why? The modern brain is up against this set of challenges, and loneliness and isolation is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Which of the tenets do you think come at a big surprise to people when you talk to your patients?
Well, it's a great question. I think the tenet of movement and how I approach movement with patients is a little different. In mental health, everybody knows the 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week. That's what does it. I approach movement a little differently, which is trying to get my patients to move. And that if that can be vigorous with some sweat and some intention and regularity, all the better. If it can be a walk around the block today, not that I'm wanting there to be a really low or minimum bar. I just want there to be more movement. I'd rather, if I had a patient sign up for dance classes, for example, there's a great study I go into in the book that looks at the effect size on depression of different types of exercise and movement. And dancing's at the top of the list. It's a very powerful antidepressant effect. But, when we think about exercise, right, usually going dancing isn't on the list. And so I think the movement will be a little surprising, because there's such a kind of no pain, no gain, muscle building, protein-centric approach to exercise right now. And I hope the movement will surprise people with my suggestions and my encouragement, really a pursuit of enjoyable movement in your life.
Mm-hmm. I think that's key, because I think one of the hardest things is doing something that's sustainable. And a lot of my patients, I think, are also at a level of fitness where they're just starting, and sometimes thinking that for something to be effective, it has to have, a certain amount of commitment, or it has to require a certain amount of fitness. It just sometimes has the opposite of the desired effect, where it's not motivating anymore. It's interesting thinking how the tenets now apply to, the modern brain, as you're saying, and how different the challenges for having good mental health would have been, say, a century ago.
Yeah, things have really shifted, right? The modern brain is different physiologically, right? And so the tenets are so different, ranging from self-awareness and the concept of modern self-awareness, right? Who are you? You behave, the way that culture has shifted. Self-awareness for a man today in our society is we're being asked different things. We're being challenged in different ways. I think some things are the same, like human connection. That felt good 100 years ago. It feels good now. I think what's shifted is in the modern world, there's just more of a challenge to that. We're like the most connected society ever, right? I have more access to more people in my phone than ever before. And yet a lot of us are feeling more isolated. And there are certain things that we can do in our days, certain decisions we make that a lot of times we're not aware of, that can tilt things towards more brain growth and repair or not. You wake up and you do a little journaling and you have a little light exercise and a nutrient dense, protein rich breakfast, and at work you spend a couple minutes first checking in with your intentions and your purpose. Maybe you have a few minutes they've put in your schedule to disconnect with somebody that you know. I've heard about people doing things like writing a letter every day. That's a big commitment, but what if it's reconnect with a friend once a week? But you can see, that's a setup, right, where we've already engaged in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 of the tenets, before midday. And it's just because it's kind of in the structure of how someone creates a lifestyle that better supports their mental health, better prioritizes their mental health.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that from both of our perspectives, which are coming at it from different specialties, the commonality is we're looking at how our modern conveniences have really impacted health, and also trying to find ways that just align with our biology. So big focus similarly is bioplasticity and neuroplasticity, 3 challenges in the case of the stress paradox, but challenges that were intrinsic to the fabric of society about 200 years ago, but we have inadvertently just eliminated.
We've made it very easy. And I think there's something about convenience and efficiency and satiation and ubiquitous easy access that there's not a tremendous amount we have to quote unquote work for. And I think we take great pleasure in that in the modern world, right? The idea that it's easy, convenient, inexpensive, that feels like progress to us. I'm not sure that's always true. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of pressure we have in the modern world to do things quickly, to feel great all the time, that avoid some of the things that have always helped us feel good and our brains feel good.
Yeah. And, so much of the focus also in mental health is around curbing chronic stress. And, one of my beliefs is that you grow so much from creating some challenges, which you've touched on. What is your advice to kind of guiding ourselves towards greater sense of purpose, joy, and fulfillment, these kind of beneficial types of challenges?
Yeah, so I end the book with the last tenet is the tenet of purpose. And there's lots of interesting data, looking if we live a life with purpose, how that's very protective for our mental health. There's even some data kind of helps with things like inflammation, and microbiome diversity even. So, kind of surprising little indicators that purpose does more for us than just feel good. Having a sense of purpose, an idea that what you are doing with your time on this earth is contributing in a way that you find fulfilling. It's one of these, I call it one of the elusive tenets. It's one of these things that isn't usually what we seem, or think it's going to be, and also where I would say a lot of the standard advice people get is quite wrong. Purpose is all around us, and I think the less we can make it about something out there, about saving the world in this way or that way, or feeding hungry children in some far-off country. Those are wonderful goals, but what if you go volunteer at the food bank in your community? That's a way to kind of get access to that right away, and that's doing great work again in your community, which is very purposeful. And so I think it's an encouragement that as people are kind of losing a sense of engagement, losing a sense of cohesion, that returning to purpose, right? Whether it's that big umbrella, right? Clearly mental health is part of my purpose on this earth, right? Or whether it's that small micro purpose of like, my purpose is to be so present here as a therapist to get to some conversation that's never been had before with you. Yeah. But really imbuing your life with a sense of purpose. I think it's so hard because when we're missing it, when we're feeling off, when we're like, ugh, I don't know, it can be hard to find. But
Absolutely.
I encourage everybody.
Well, Drew, this is incredibly helpful. Well, thank you for all the insight and sharing all this information with us.
Well, thank you so much for highlighting healing the modern brain and thinking about the synergies between our work. It's really a treat to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you. That was so good. amazing to think that our modern brain is exposed to so many challenges in our contemporary world. And Drew's framework is just so helpful, thinking that we have 9 tenets for mental fitness, and that's really what we are after. And that's, something that you can learn more about from his book. And he mentions some of these tenets: self-awareness, connection, movement, purpose. Again, such a powerful approach to health. And what I love about his approach is that he said there are over 100 chemicals in our brain, and we can balance that through medication, through psychotherapy, as well as this broader holistic approach. And it's not an either or. We can actually be doing all of these things. And I think that that is something that we need to hear, because being in healthcare, it's not something that's emphasized enough in the clinical space. And a key theme that keeps coming up, as Drew mentioned, it's a key theme of the stress paradox, and we're going to hear more about, is this whole idea of growth and repair, growth and repair. That is what we're really after. And these lifestyle tools that we're talking about are ways that we can do that naturally. And our body has this incredible ability to grow and repair. And we're really just tuning into our natural ability to do this kind of work, to keep ourselves healthy, to live in alignment with how our body optimizes itself. And so, again, really appreciate everything he's contributed. So far you have heard Drew and you heard Robynne talk about the important role of plants. And by plants, we're referring to the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, spices, nuts, and seeds. And we're in for a real treat. Sam Cutler is going to show us now live to do a demo on how to incorporate some of these plants. So if you don't know Sam, Sam Cutler is a Harvard-trained nutrition coach, creator of the Fit Fatale, and founder of Mindful. She leads a movement towards joyful anti-inflammatory eating with the Mindful app, a nutrition-focused platform offering whole food-focused meal plans, health coaching, and a supportive community in over 70 countries around the world. Mindful aims to break the stigma around women's health, moving away from dieting, tracking, and measuring, and instead teaching women how to nourish themselves, build confidence in the kitchen with whole foods, and understand the science behind ingredients. Sam is the social media force behind the Fit Fatale, an online community of over 500,000 women, where she has spent the past 10 years sharing her own story, healing chronic inflammatory conditions, and operating as a high-performing CEO. I'm going to hand it over to Sam.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dr. Sharon. This has been so incredible so far to hear from all of the doctors and specialists. I've selfishly just loved listening into everything. So I'm Sam Cutler, founder of Mindful, and at Mindful, we do nutrition a little bit differently. So what you've potentially seen before from other coaches or nutrition apps or even meal plans is really a measured and calculated approach to understanding calories in, calories out. But it doesn't need to be as complicated as adding additional stress, which we're talking about a lot today, to ourselves so that we are stressing about the intake of our calories, our grams, all of that. So what we do at Mindful is we drop the measurements and we make it super easy to actually track, to actually just enjoy the foods that you're eating. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Are we good? Awesome. Okay. And so today I'm going to take you through 2 really simple recipes where we are going to do some meal prep incorporating plants and whole foods and all the benefits that we get. So at Mindful, we really focus on the benefits over the tracking piece and really looking at how we can just lean into a more whole food focused diet, which is what everybody here has really been emphasizing for improving things like our immune system, our overall health, our heart health, all of these pieces, and ultimately lowering stress. Because because sometimes the actual stress about what we're eating can be more impactful than what we're consuming. So I'm going to take you through 2 recipes. They're really easy, and I wanted to do meal prep for breakfast because for some of us, it's a little bit later in the evening, and it's a great way. If you guys have the ingredients at home, you can follow along with me, or you can just take notes, come back and do this, or jump into the Mindful app at any point to see any of our recipes. So the first thing that we're going to do for our cooking demo is a kimchi egg bite. So kimchi is amazing for gut health. I am a huge fan of anything fermented, and in any place that we can add it in, it is a great way to increase our intake of fermented foods. Now, this is literally one of the easiest recipes, you guys, and if you have kids or you're really busy and you're running out, this is such a great thing to just have in your fridge, have it ready, and you can grab it and run and go. So we're going to take you through exactly this. And I'm going to also show you what I mean by not really measuring your ingredients and how easy it is to just kind of flow with the fun in the kitchen. And I also think it brings back a lot of fun. We heard that this evening from a lot of different doctors talking about the exercise we do being the fun option. I think we need to take that approach when we talk about our nutrition as well, because we need to just do the thing that really feels good to actually enjoy our process while we're cooking. And we want to just have fun with it a little bit and go back to it. Think about the way your grandparents, your grandma used to cook, and that's kind of where we need to lean back into. All right, so I'm going to take you through these egg bites. So what you need, if you are following along, and I'm here in my kitchen, is literally a muffin tin, and that's super easy here. I'm actually going to just fix my camera a little bit so you guys can see it there. A muffin tin and maybe some type of mixing bowl is going to be your best bet. So I usually say about 1 egg per muffin tin. So I'm going to make 6 with you today. I already have my oven on, and we're just going to break these in here. Super easy, breaking in our eggs. And I am a big fan of eating protein first thing in the morning. It's a great way to deliver energy to support you, especially if you are heading to a workout or you have to run to work or you have to take your kids. It's really just an option it's just really just a great way to support yourself throughout the day. I'm just making sure. I'm seeing some comments that I'm a little bit blurry.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
Just got really good. It was blurry in the beginning,
Okay.
Sam, but you're looking
Now we're back.
now. We're back.
Okay. I'm so sorry, you guys. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And we're back in. So I'm breaking, like I said, 6 eggs here into this mixing bowl, and we are going to make 6 different little egg bites. So again, no wrong way to do this. I'm just going to rinse my hands here on the side. All right, cool. So we've added these in. So this is a super simple recipe, like I said. You can break these up. You can see I've got my 6 eggs. And you just want to kind of like mix them up together in here. Really, really easy. All right. Then you can add some chopped in onion. I have red onion here. You can use white onion. No wrong answer. You don't need to measure it. I haven't measured anything. This was actually left over from my dinner I made. So just easy. You can't add too much unless you're not a fan of onion, but it's really just going to add a little bit of flavor and fun. It's going to create that sort of omelet mixture together. Okay. Then we are adding in our kimchi here. So I'm going to open this up and we're adding in the kimchi. So again, with the kimchi, it's again all about preference. I love kimchi and I also like it really spicy. So I'm adding in a bunch because it's really my favorite part of this recipe. Something to note with kimchi is that a lot of kimchi brands do have added cane sugar. I opt for this brand that I get from Whole Foods, which is called Wild Brine, because they don't add any additional sugar, which is great because we know that additional sugar or added cane sugar or processed sugar is additional disruption to our gut. And so just paying attention to the ingredients versus measuring is saying, okay, let me look at the back of this to actually check what is it that I'm consuming? And a lot of sauces or salad dressings or packaged products add in additional processed sugars and things that are hormone disruptors, gut disruptors. They really impact our muscle recovery or inflammation. So it's really important to think about excess sugar that we are adding into our routine. So it's just something to pay attention to. Again, not stress about it, but just use it as a tool to really learn a little bit more about what you're ingesting and how you can improve and optimize feeling your best. and of course, longevity and living a long, healthy life. So all of our recipes on Mindful are predominantly plant-based, but not vegan, as I mentioned, because we're doing eggs. So we do use animal proteins. I know Dr. Sharon and I have a similar view on this. It's about using predominantly plant-based, but incorporating real whole ingredients. So we do have things like chicken, eggs, etc. Now, the whole platform is also gluten and dairy free, which is a great way to support if you are suffering from any type of autoimmune or inflammatory conditions. We like to make it easy. But again, if you love your dairy or your gluten or whatever it is, and you want to check out Mindful, we always say just opt for the version that's best for you. So I'm using a plant-based feta tonight to make this kimchi egg bite, but you can use real feta. You can use really any type of cheese that you prefer. This version does, I checked the ingredients, and it does have a potato starch base and a coconut base. And so it has minimal added ingredients. So again, just opting for the best version that you can find is really going to be your superpower. So I've already kind of chopped this into small little bites. We're going to add it in here. I have definitely made this recipe, probably, I don't know, 30 times or so. And I've had moments where I do not have any plant-based feta. So I will actually just use Parmesan, plant-based Parmesan, or even cream cheese. Works really well. So if you want to follow along and you want to make this at home and you don't have all the ingredients, this is a great option. Okay, so all you have to do here is take a little ladle, a scooper. I'm going to try to do it in the ones you can see. Oh, back here, okay. And just fill your cups. And this is a non-stick, non-toxic pan, so it actually doesn't need any coating. But if you do need a coating, you could use olive oil to gently coat the sides of the pan. But with the eggs like this, they actually just pop out. Super simple. And we're going to just fill these cups. And depending on how much of your ingredients you added, you might fill them a little bit more, a little bit less. We're just adding that in. And then that is super, super easy. So again, like I said, if you have kids, if you're working, you have partners at home, you have a busy household, these are so great to keep stocked in your fridge. They also can be a meal prep for breakfast, but also for snacks as well. So if you want to grab this as a protein snack in the middle of your day, it's a great option. And for breakfast, you can have as many as you like. So I'm going to pop this in the oven, and then we're going to jump into our second recipe that we are prepping here. I wanted to do that one first so that it can cook while we are doing our second really, really easy meal prep recipe. Okay, so the second recipe is our matcha chia pudding. I'm obsessed with chia. There's so many benefits to it. It has lots of omega-3s. It's an added plant protein. It's also going to give you a great source of fiber. So you're getting so much from chia. It's like such a powerful superfood that you can add in. So I love to get this wherever I can. And prepping chia bowls is really, really easy. So I'm going to take you through doing this. And with matcha, it is just so tasty. You're getting a little bit of boost. If you're not familiar with matcha, matcha is green tea powder format. So you can actually just give yourself a little bit of a boost in the morning as a energy boost. Okay. I also buy these little meal prep tins on Amazon. If you are looking for something to make it easy, you can make them in here, or you can even just make them in like a glass you have at home. Really easy. You don't need to buy these. I just think they look really cute in the fridge. And if you have, again, kids and family at home, it's really fun. Okay. So you would take either a packet of matcha, or if you just have a container of matcha, you can take about a tablespoon or so is probably going to be the right amount for you. I'm just going to open this little packet because I like these individual packs, and we're dropping some everywhere. This is the power of live TV, and we're going to add it in here. Okay, cool. Amazing. So we've added that in. And then I'm going to add a little bit of honey. Now, honey is such a great way to get natural energy. I love honey. I think that incorporating honey and maple syrup, you could swap it for maple syrup if you prefer, are such a great way to just still get your sweetness in your honey, but not have that same spike and that same impact as processed sugar on your gut and, of course, on your blood sugar level and your insulin. So we're going to add in, I'm just going to this is what I do in the kitchen, you guys. So I have all my tools ready. We're going to add in just a little bit of a scoop of honey here. I'm actually using a fork, but that's, probably about a tablespoon or so. Again, no stress for measurements. You really can't do this wrong. That's just going to be to taste. If you prefer a little sweeter, you can add a little bit more. And then we're going to grab our kettle back here, like you're in my kitchen with me, which is so fun. And you're just going to fill it up. The reason we're putting in the honey before we actually pour in the hot water is because you really want the honey to melt and really get mixed in with the matcha before we're doing anything with the chia, or else you're going to see a little bit of clumping. So we want to get our water to about 180 degrees. That's the perfect temperature for matcha. I am not necessarily a matcha expert, but I do know a couple of founders of some matcha brands, and they've told me specifically getting to 180 is the best temperature when you are heating up matcha. Otherwise, you can actually burn it and lose some of the powerful benefits that it has. And matcha is really, really great for, of course, a more sustained energy source of over a caffeine spike. It does have caffeine, but over the way coffee reacts in the body, it's less harmful on our gut, less acidic, but it also is super hydrating at the same time. So you're not having that same sort of sense of dehydration if you're having too much coffee. So I like that as well. I don't feel that same sort of, headaches maybe from coffee, etc. Okay. And I use this little handheld blender because it makes sure we don't get any clumping happening in our matcha and our honey mixture. All right. Now we're going to take chia. Like I said, this is such a superfood to add into your morning. Also helps you with your digestion. It is just a great, I find chia has such an internal cleansing power. It really just does help process everything through your digestive system and gives you a protein boost, omega-3s, fiber, like I said, just really moving everything through. Okay, so for this, you could probably do 2 or 3 tablespoons. For some of these recipes like this, we will put suggested measurements on our on Mindful, but you also have videos to follow like this one, where you will see all of the recipes and the amounts that I do. So I'm going to do probably 3 tablespoons of chia in here. Perfect. For something smaller, like maybe a cup at home, I would probably do 2, but this one's a little bit bigger. And it might be a lot of chia to have in one sitting. And if you're feeling full, you save it for later. I think that's what's great about these is you can reseal them and keep them for a snack as well. All right, so as easy as that is, we've now added in our chia, and we're going to put in a little bit of this matcha. I'll probably use about half. You know what? We can make 2 while we're at it. So I have one for my husband and one for me tomorrow because we have the ingredients. So why would we waste it? I will also say that this is definitely a fan favorite whenever we have guests coming, or my husband has a really busy week as well, and we want to just make sure we have things prepped. We will absolutely do this. You can also do overnight oats in these little containers, which is a great way. That was another option I was going to take you guys through. Great way to get protein and energy boost in the morning. All right, so we've added our matcha in here with our chia. Now we're going to add in our nut milk of choice. Again, if you prefer to have milk, that's up to you. I'm a big fan of cashew milk. I just find it a little nuttier and fattier and it just tastes so delicious. And it also, if you're looking at the ingredients, again, I'm a big ingredient person. I love to get this one from Elmhurst because it's only 2 ingredients inside. So it's just cashews and water. Cashew milk, you could also make at home, but that's a little ambitious for some of us. I am very much about just making it easy, quick, and supporting ourselves with our busy lifestyle because we don't want to add more stress. So you're going to fill up pretty much the rest of this container. Hopefully I have enough milk here with our milk. Cannot get more easy than that. I use this again to mix it up just because I find it can get a little bit clumpy. There we go. You just want to make sure you rinse the mixer after really well because it will get chia in it. And chia expands. So if you are unfamiliar with chia, you haven't really worked with it in the kitchen, it's definitely a really fun tool, but it is also does expand once it goes into water. And so it can get really sticky, it can get into funny places. So that's why this looks super watery. But by tomorrow, or actually probably in a couple of hours, it is going to be a full, delicious one. I actually pre-made one before just to kind of show you what it looks like so you guys have an idea. So here you go. This is our pre-made breakfast prep for our matcha chia pudding. I'm going to show you an example in the fridge here of one that is finished. You guys, I honestly think that my husband may have eaten it. This is just live TV, live chats. Okay. Well, I think my husband ate the one that I had the example of, but that is it. Our kimchi egg bites are not finished, but I don't want to take too long. I want to come back to you guys. The oven is at 375 for about 10-15 minutes max. It's not a long time. It depends on how you like your eggs. So some people do like their eggs really well cooked. Some people like them a little bit softer. So it's really up to preference. When you're adding the kimchi, when it heats, you will get a little bit of liquid release from the cabbage. And so it will get a little bit more liquidy naturally. So sometimes leaving it in a little bit longer and making sure that that feta melts to give you the whole flavor is going to be so powerful. And so those are two really easy ways to get high protein breakfast, simple meal prep on the go. You don't need to measure them. You don't need to stress about what you're doing. Just have fun in the kitchen. Bring it back to the simples and basics and really think about leaning into whole food ingredients and finding what works for your body. At Mindful, we are all about thinking about what works for me. When I eat this and I don't feel good, what have I learned here? Instead of creating guilt and stress for myself, have I been able to learn a little bit more about what does work for me? I saw the little code pop up. Today, we are offering you guys $100 off our annual plans at Mindful. If you are curious to check it out, you can use code STRESS100. We'll also be sending an email after this if you want to learn a little bit more about Mindful and what we do. And I'll be back on here for our Q&A at the end. And I can show you the egg bites at the end, actually, because they will be finished.
That is so awesome, Sam. Amazing. I love how you make it look so easy.
Except until my husband ate the finished one that I had as an example. He's gonna hear that one later, but
Hey, he's a lucky man.
yeah, that was his afternoon snack.
So, Sam, we have a question that came through. The comment is, love kimchi, but I've only had it straight out of the jar. I wonder what it does to probiotics when heated.
Yeah, so you are going to lose some of the benefits. The baseline will stay there. It's kind of like the idea of when we eat our probiotic that isn't spore-based and how we do lose some of the benefits as we digest it because of heating it. I actually keep it at a lower heat. So 375, you're not increasing it to 400, 450 and letting it cook for a little bit longer. So you're still going to get a lot of those benefits. Another option is also adding additional on top for the flavor to kind of get a little boost of those extra probiotics, but you do lose a little bit when you heat it, but you're still going to get the baseline of a lot of those benefits from the digestion.
Fantastic. So Sam is going to join me at the end. We're going to take a lot more of questions. But for now, we're going to keep moving. We have 3 more wonderful conversations. So on a very different note, we're going to talk about the words that no one really wants to hear next. And those words are you have cancer. So that's our next topic. And here to talk about it is Dr. Dawn Mussallem. And she's going to talk about the power of good stress for breast cancer prevention and survivorship. So if you don't know Dr. Mussallem, she is a breast cancer and lifestyle medicine specialist at the Mayo Clinic Breast Center in Jacksonville, Florida. She's also one of the most inspiring people that I know. She is a survivor of stage 4 aggressive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. While treatment saved her life, they also led to heart failure and cardiac arrest. She needed a heart transplant, and miraculously, she received a new heart while she was in the hospital on IV therapies. And just 1 year after her heart transplant, she ran a marathon. I mean, just incredible. A healthy lifestyle has been the cornerstone of her wonderful story. I think you'll agree with me that her energy and love of life are absolutely contagious. Dawn, it's so wonderful having you.
Sharon, it's so good to see you. At the end of the day, this is a beautiful way to be welcomed. So I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you. So, Dawn, I know that providing evidence-based information that empowers your patients really matters to you. How impactful would you say lifestyle habits are as medicine for cancer prevention and survivorship?
Yeah, beautiful question. And you know, when we step back and ask how many cancer cases can actually be prevented, there's a bit of a range. You know, anywhere between 30 and 50% from the American Cancer Society, from the American Institute for Cancer Research. When you really look at that number in terms of absolute numbers, what is that impact? We're talking on average that we would save about 800,000 lives a year without being diagnosed with cancer. That is substantial to prevent over 800,000 cancer cases a year just from lifestyle. And I love how the American Institute for Cancer Research, you know, I really feel that is the leading source for patients, where we have global research to inform us on the importance of lifestyle and that intersection of cancer occurrence as well as cancer survivorship. And so when we break down those cancer prevention guidelines, you know, we got to work at a better body mass index. We got to get rid of some of the body fat and add muscle. We want to focus on the nutrition. And they have 4 elements of those recommendations that really lean in on nutrition. And it's just so easy, you know, getting more whole food in, focusing on the vegetables and the fruits, whole grains, trying to replace some of the animal protein with some plant protein, getting rid of the ultra-processed foods, sugary beverages, trying not to do fast food. We just talked before we got on about, yeah, we bring our lunches to work, you know, trying to do that. You save so much money. People think that healthy eating pattern is more expensive. It's not. You can actually save money. And in JAMA 2023, they showed that you can save $500 a year eating healthy if you do it right and you prepare. So it may take more time, but you got to show up for yourself. You can't forget about movement. You know, I exercise and just moving your body regularly is so important. And then the big one, I mean, we just saw from the Surgeon General about alcohol, right? So for cancer prevention, you should avoid alcohol. Now, if it's part of someone's social network and you want to enjoy perhaps one drink a few times a week, well, that's your decision, but you want to make sure that you limit it to the lowest amount possible, because the more you drink, the more risk you get. And that's very important. And also to really highlight the importance of serving size, because if someone's going to do a glass of wine as their one drink, it needs to be a small pour, like a 5-ounce pour. So those are really important, critical aspects that we can get good cancer control. And it's such a privilege to be in this space, both for cancer prevention, as well as those same guidelines are what are in line for cancer survivors to be the healthiest version of themselves too.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that. Can you speak more about the survivorship, how making these dietary changes affects how people do long term?
Yeah, you know, and again, I think it really, you want to focus on that as an overall pattern of living, but we can highlight the diabetes risk reduction study that was done among breast cancer survivors. And this was an important study that wasn't a perfect diet. They certainly weren't whole food plant only like a lot of people seek out to do. What they did in this diet is they leaned on more fiber from whole grain cereals. They had whole fruit and they got rid of the fruit juice. They really tried to get rid of that red meat. You know, we know red meat is a probable carcinogen. So they got rid of red meat, they got rid of trans fats, and they even mentioned in this study that things like coffee and nuts were seen to be healthy. And what they showed is that this intervention of eating healthier did in fact result in reduced risk of breast cancer recurrence, as well as improved overall survival. What was really interesting in this study is it also highlighted the fact that it's never too late to change. Because in women who led a really destructive lifestyle leading up to their breast cancer diagnosis, but they said, oh my gosh, I'm ready to change. This is such a teachable moment. I know my why, and they lean into that healthy living. We saw that those women also have improved outcomes after their breast cancer, both from improved breast cancer specific survival as well as overall survival. So powerful study to illuminate that fact. There was another study called the DELCAP study that just looked at overall healthy living after a breast cancer diagnosis that actually showed us that they had improved overall survival after the breast cancer diagnosis by 58%. So that's a very big, exciting number to share.
The numbers are just incredible. Both as you mentioned in the beginning about prevention and the survivorship, just incredible. Dawn, how about meal timing? How does when you eat make a difference in prevention and survivorship?
That's so important, Sharon, and it's just so simple. We need to just really step back and say when the sun comes up, that's us preparing our bodies to start eating our breakfast. We're breaking our fast. Our fast is what's happening over nighttime. So as the sun goes down, we have our evening meal upon sundown. Ideally, that's 5, 6 o'clock at night, and we go ahead and start our fast then. So I love that starting our fast after dinner upon sundown. Let's say that's 6 to 7 o'clock, and then you break that fast 12 hours later as we have that sunrise coming up. That's what I really try to work with my patients. That's what I do in my own personal life. We want to give the body a little break over nighttime and not have that constant food coming in. That's very important. I do worry. I think fasting has become very popular, and that's okay. But I see a lot of folks want to continue to eat until late at night. And then what they do is they don't eat until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're missing that very opportune time to get their calories in when their body's expecting it. And carbohydrate metabolism is really optimized in the morning hours. So you don't want to miss breakfast. You want to get that really balanced meal at breakfast time. High fiber, high quality carbohydrates, vegetables or fruits, whatever you prefer at breakfast time. Most people are going to probably do some berries with some oats. But you really want to focus in on that balanced meal at breakfast time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the stress paradox, I call it the circadian fast, essentially eating in 12 hours or less, but having most of those calories early in the day, just as you mentioned, for cancer and a whole host of other diseases. And Dawn, I want to ask you, a central concept of the stress paradox is the importance of building resilience through good stressors like plant phytochemicals, exercise, and motivating challenges. You are the shining example of resilience. What is your advice for building resilience and flourishing during and after adversity?
Thanks, Sharon. I just feel so blessed actually to have been given the life journey I've had because I just have such gratitude really truly for my aliveness. But our life's challenges hold such deep wisdom. And I think within reflecting upon that, we just really have to learn to accept. Whatever comes our way, there is deep meaning in that. And if we can learn to accept that and just move beyond, I think that is just so very, very important. And I really feel that you really, truly can't fully know joy without having met some hardship, or whether it's sorrow, or whether it's grief in our life. And so that's very important. They've done research to show that people that try to avoid stress actually typically lean to more unhealthy behaviors to deal with it, like alcohol, versus people that try to work through it. That's more of a growth mindset. And that's very, very important. They typically lean on healthier behaviors like, I'm going to go walk, I'm going to go exercise, I'm going to call a friend. So, during these times of hardship, it's really a time to embrace connection as well as love. And you need to show up for yourself. So it's both self-love and love for others. And my favorite description really to exhibit that is when we think of the heart, and a mentor of mine that's very dear to me shared this with me. When we think of the heart and it pumps its blood, it always keeps 5% of the blood for itself. So it can nourish itself and nurture itself before it can serve the rest of the body. And that's very important because 95% of what it is doing after it shows up for itself, it really cares for itself, loves itself, is it serving the needs of others. And so getting through that resilience, getting through hardship with resilience for me had a lot to do with purpose and meaning and service of others. And I think that that's very, very important. And every day I'm just so incredibly inspired by my patients, just seeing what they're going through and how they're growing through their own adversities. So we have to remember that. We have to trust.
Yeah, and Dawn, you do so much that is purposeful. I mean, you're such a mission-driven person, and you make such a difference in so many people's lives. And, doing things that constantly stretch and push you are really a form of stress. But how do you find that affects you in terms of your energy, your outlook, your health?
That's such an interesting question. And maybe I'm unique in a way, but for me, I thrive on a little bit of stress. It's kind of like our muscles. When we want to grow muscle, we got to stress our muscle and it grows. And so for me, that's stress. I just have that trust in knowing that there's something beyond that. And again, I look for that lesson as to why that stressor is coming my way. We all, right, take really good care of ourselves. This is where exercise is so important, because when times are a little bit more stressful. And life is always going to have stress. We can't escape the stress, but we have to know how to manage it. And so for me, exercise is very important to use up some of that adrenaline. So I love to run. That's wonderful. But then some downshift time. Things like deep breathing exercises or yoga or prayer, whatever is special to you, all of those work really well for me when things are just a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, you couldn't have summarized the stress paradox any better. I mean, it is that growth from kind of pushing yourself a little bit, just like you said, just like a muscle, and the importance of the recovery, right? Just so that we grow from the stress and our bodies have time to actually remodel and reconfigure. And so we're ready to push ourselves again. But it's so important, like you just said, to have both. And that's just such a beautiful way to approach life and be able to impact so many people like you do.
Oh, I love that. And, I think everything we do is out of love. And I think it feels so warm. It just feels so good just to show up for others in that purposeful way of living. So I just love the work you do, Sharon. Thank you.
Likewise. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Sharon.
Another wonderful conversation. I find it so incredible that she said 30 to 50% of cancers can be prevented through lifestyle, which can total to 800,000 cancer cases per year being preventable. Of all these things we're talking about, the foods we eat, the movement, the purpose can make such a difference. And not just in preventing cancer, but as Dawn just mentioned, in recurrence, in survival, and that it's never too late. Another really important takeaway is this importance of eating in sync with our biology, that eating earlier in the day, trying to limit our eating within 12 hours allows our body to do so much of the repair to prevent cancer and all the diseases that we're talking about. And Dawn's beautiful story of leaning into stress and just having to trust. I think you're starting to see some themes that are being shared here about the importance of purpose, the importance of showing up for yourself. So now I'm going to switch over to have a wonderful conversation with another one of my really good friends, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, or Dr. B. He's a celebrated gastroenterologist and gut health expert, founder of the popular microbiome nutrition company 38 Terra, the New York Times bestselling author of 2 books, and the U.S. medical director for Zoe and adjunct assistant professor at Emory University School of Medicine. He's a champion for preventing and reversing disease through microbiome optimization and shares his expertise via social media at theguthealthmd.com. Will, so wonderful to have you be a part of this masterclass.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always fun to hang out and talk to you.
Yeah, so, Will, since the time we were in medical school and residency, information about the gut microbiome has absolutely exploded, really, even since the time you've written Fiber Fueled. I want to hone in on one specific connection, and that's between our gut health and our metabolic health, because of so much recent awareness that up to 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So what is the connection between the gut microbiome and our metabolism and metabolic health?
Well, we could dig into a lot of different things. This could be a very complex and long conversation, but if I were to summarize it in one word, I would use the word fiber. So truly, because, it's not a coincidence. 93% of Americans are meeting criteria to be considered metabolically unwell. And in parallel, 95% of Americans are deficient in fiber. I mean, it's basically a one-to-one relationship, and we can go through the effects of dietary fiber, but the key is that dietary fiber is not improving your metabolism by sweeping through you and resulting in a bowel movement. That is not the way that dietary fiber works. It is bioactive and the result of our gut microbes unlocking and releasing the short-chain fatty acids that go on to affect our blood pressure, our cholesterol, our insulin sensitivity, our blood sugar and ability to maintain regulation of our blood sugar levels, our fat metabolism, and whether we are in fat storing or fat burning mode. These are all important in different aspects. I should also mention satiety. So like our ability to feel full during a meal so that we don't overeat. These are all different aspects of what dietary fiber allows us to accomplish. It's unlocked by the gut microbiome. You can't discuss these benefits without acknowledging that it's the microbes that make this possible. And I think that the data are overwhelming that if we were to address the 95% deficiency in the United States, we would be simultaneously making America much more metabolically healthy.
Absolutely. And what conditions, metabolic conditions, are associated with dysbiosis?
Well, I kind of, in a way, just mentioned them. So it would include high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, as well as obesity. And then, there's other conditions that people may not classically think of as being metabolic, but I would consider cardiovascular disease to be metabolic in nature. I would consider chronic kidney disease. And there's an argument to be made that there's cognitive disorders that are metabolic in nature that, when I say cognitive disorders, it's not just Alzheimer's disease. It can be different versions of cognitive decline. So to me, these are different aspects of our health. I would be remiss as a gastroenterologist to not also mention the liver.
Exactly.
And liver disease tends to be, aside from the viruses, the burden of liver disease today that's emerging is actually metabolic liver disease. And, we may refer to this as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or there's more of a new updated term for it, but I still call it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah, and it's really amazing the far reach of poor metabolic health, as you just mentioned, because, if you think of it like a train ride, the first stop really is, poor metabolism or metabolic health, but it also leads to cardiometabolic disease, brain disease, neurodegenerative conditions, even cancer risk, fatty liver, as you mentioned. So it just highlights how critical the gut bacterial balance is. Yeah, and speaking of that, so, getting us to the healthiest gut microbiome. So one of the concepts that you explain really well in Fiber Fueled is that the key to improving the gut microbial health is fostering growth. And the greatest growth comes from facing discomfort head on. And that's the central concept of the stress paradox. Can you explain how there's similarly a fiber paradox?
Yeah, I think that to me, there's two sort of ideas that come to mind in this discussion. So one is having a growth mindset, which is the ability to face challenges and actually see the advantages of those challenges and overcome them and become stronger as a result of them. And I'm a big believer in growth mindset, and I like to take that concept, which, by the way, was originally presented to us by Carolyn Dweck. I'd love to take that concept and apply it to how we address the gut and our approach to fostering better gut health. And in a way, exercise is the same thing. So in the same sort of way, applying the idea of a growth mindset or the idea of exercise, I like to apply those concepts to how we approach the gut. I think of the gut as a muscle. And a muscle can be trained. A muscle can be made stronger. A muscle can heal to restore function. Or we can add function that you've never had before. And these are the benefits of challenges, because without the challenge, if you stop using the muscle, you lose it, right? Like if you use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. This is like the general concept of exercise. It's completely and totally true. And every person who is listening now to this masterclass, they get that. And I want you to get that with the gut too, which is that when we take food and we toss it, when we eliminate foods from our diet, we're not getting better at processing and digesting that food. And there are cases where elimination is necessary. And there's also benefits to temporary elimination, but that's a different thing. My concern is when a person is permanently eliminating food from their diet. That to me is like saying, I'm going to stop using my legs. I'm not going to walk anymore because I hurt my knee. And if you do that, your knee will not hurt, but your legs grow weaker, and there are consequences throughout the body as a result of this. So the strategy that any of us would use if we hurt our knee is we would rehabilitate that knee. And we would do it in a controlled way. It would be gentle progression through challenges. And as you progress through those challenges, you're restoring and adding function back. And I see the gut as being the same way, which is that people who struggle with food intolerances, people that struggle with a damaged gut and symptoms, that through a proper graded approach, we can progress through challenges and we can add back functionality, or we can improve functionality and add function that we haven't previously had.
Absolutely. And, you have brilliantly said that with fiber, but phytochemicals are part of this paradox as well, right? So we grow our tolerance to phytochemicals. Can you talk a little bit about the role of phytochemicals in gut bacterial balance? I think a lot of focus goes on fiber appropriately, and also protein in our diet gets a lot of attention, but phytochemicals to me are these unsung heroes in food. Can you talk about their role in gut bacterial balance?
Yeah, there are at least tens of thousands of phytochemicals. I'm sure there are many that we aren't even aware of and haven't identified to date. And among phytochemicals, so this terminology, phyto means plant, chemical, of course, is chemical, so plant-based chemicals. Among that, it's a broad umbrella. And within that are things like polyphenols. Polyphenols are what give the colors to our food. So like things that are red, things that are orange, things that are purple, right, come from specific families of phytochemicals. And there's a few interesting things about this. So first of all, the effect of these polyphenols on our gut microbiome, they are beneficial. Polyphenols, I won't get super nerdy with the biochemistry. Sharon, you might be interested, but most of these people will not be interested in the nerdy biochemistry. But let me just describe it this way. If you were to look at the structure, the chemical structure of these polyphenols, they're very large. And because they're so large, we can't easily absorb them. And we don't have, there's at least 8,000 polyphenols, probably more. We know very little about them because we haven't studied all of them. But we don't have the enzymes to break down these polyphenols, and they're not readily absorbed by our body. But when they come into contact with our gut microbiome, there's an intelligence that exists within this ecosystem that we inherited, basically nature's intelligence we inherited through our microbiome, that allows them, the microbes, to transform the polyphenols and put them into a position so that we can absorb them. Now, I mentioned the colors, but I want to throw out some of the names because many people have heard of these, and you may not realize that this is what I'm referring to. So resveratrol, which of course is why people drink red wine, but there are other things that contain resveratrol, not just red wine, but nonetheless. Or people hear about the value of turmeric and how it's anti-inflammatory. Well, turmeric has curcumin, and curcumin is also a polyphenol. Many people don't realize that. So there's all these different polyphenols that exist, and it's because of the gut microbiome that we get access to them. But the cool thing is that the microbes are transformed as well. So they're working on the polyphenol, they're changing it, they're making it accessible for us as humans. That's beautiful. But at the same time, the microbes change. And what we see happening as a result of this is a shift towards the types of microbes that are anti-inflammatory and produce short-chain fatty acids from our fiber. So in essence, what you receive as a gift when you consume these polyphenol-based foods, these plant-based foods, is a microbiome that is now better prepared to process and digest fiber and more efficient in the production of your short-chain fatty acids, where you could eat the exact same amount of fiber and you actually get more beneficial anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids. So this is a beautiful thing. And real quick, while we're on the topic of good stress, I have to mention there's this interesting concept that exists of like, does it make a difference if your blueberries are grown in a greenhouse or up north in Canada? And the answer is absolutely yes, because research has found that polyphenols are actually produced by the plant in nature in response to stress. So, for example, colder temperatures create a more hardy plant that is higher in polyphenol content. And the result of this is that these plants then are better able to nourish us humans. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Stressed out plants are good for us.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's such a core part of one of the chapters in the stress paradox, and this interconnectedness between us and plants. And not only do they benefit the microbiome, but they also activate our cellular stress responses. That is another layer of making us more resilient as humans in terms of our antioxidant capacity, reducing inflammation, repairing DNA, all these critical functions that are activated by the stress and that tiny bit of discomfort that I think that leads to this growth. Such synergy, really. So that brings me to ask, what should a daily eating pattern look like, or even a weekly eating pattern? What should our plate look like?
Colorful. So I think that the core concept, and this is what I describe in my book, Fiber Fueled, and this remains true to this date. And if you look out across the landscape of people who are microbiome experts, you'll all hear them, if they're truly a microbiome expert, you'll all hear them saying the same thing, which is variety is key. Specifically, variety of plant-based foods. So what we want to do is we want to increase the variety on the plate. And where that starts is actually when we step into the supermarket. Because if you don't bring it home, it's not going to arrive into your gut at any point. And then we have to also become comfortable with concepts that allow us to build this. Because the truth is, Sharon, that we ultimately are the stewards of our own health. The system will not do this for us. There's some stuff that can be good in there. There's a lot that I don't particularly care for. But let's just put it this way, that when you step into your supermarket, you walk through that door, 75% of the plant-based calories come from 3 plant-based foods: wheat, corn, and soy. And that is not to vilify those foods, because I can make a strong argument for the health benefits of each of those 3. But it's more so to say that I'm advocating for variety in the diet, and that is not what your supermarket is providing. So ultimately, this comes to us to be the ones motivated to do it. And it's not necessarily, yes, you can pick up the dragon fruit and try a new food. Yes, you can do that. But it's also simpler concepts, like having a routine that includes smoothies that basically become a vehicle for plant diversity. Or like anytime you have a sauce or a soup, something that's liquid based, you should always be asking the question, which beans am I throwing in there? And what veggies can I throw in there? Right? Those are basically vehicles for plant diversity. So seeing those opportunities that exist in the kitchen so that it just naturally falls into our diet and you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah, just as simple as swapping out different fruits and vegetables and getting the basic template, which is, something that I think if you get a few down, make it so much easier. And the book actually contains templates for that reason. So, Will, thank you so much. This is so insightful. I'm so glad to have you as part of this masterclass. So thanks for joining.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. And everyone, I hope you enjoy. This is a wonderful forum for discussion on this topic.
conversations with Will are always so insightful. And as Adele put in the chat, yes, he is the Prince of Poop. So a couple things to recap. The interaction of the phytochemicals with our gut microbiome is such an important part of our metabolic health. I think that's why you've heard this recurrent theme about the importance of the phytochemicals throughout tonight, and the importance in our metabolic health, and what it does to our metabolism is such a vital part because that leads to so many downstream changes. And the growth mindset, you're now also hearing that as another recurrent theme. And I love how Will makes the analogy between the gut and a muscle. And resilience is also a muscle, and we can build it through these microdoses of stress, just as you can with microdoses of fiber. He made this wonderful analogy with knee pain, right? So the instinct is to guard your knee, to not use it if you've had a knee injury, but there are going to be consequences of that. The muscles are going to get weaker. And the best way to kind of rehab is eventually to slowly engage, do more exercises, make that knee stronger. And that's what we want to do with every part of our body. And his, a line that he said that I'm just going to quote him on because it was said so beautifully is that we are the stewards of our own health. The system will not do it for us. And I can attest to that as someone in the system and someone who, wanted to do this kind of work, write a book, have this master class. It's all about empowerment. And I hope that if there's one thing you take away, it's just the importance of investing that time in yourself, learning and being empowered to make changes in your health. So we have one more wonderful and amazing colleague, another dear friend of mine. Our next guest is Dr. Amy Comander, who's the medical director of the Mass General Cancer Center in Waltham, Massachusetts, where she also serves as the director of breast oncology and cancer survivorship at the Mass General Cancer Center in Waltham and at Newton Wellesley Hospital. She received her undergraduate degree and a master's degree in neuroscience at Harvard University. She received her medical degree at Yale University School of Medicine and completed her internal medicine residency and hematology oncology fellowship training at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Comander is well known for her compassionate care and devotion to her patients, and you'll soon see why. She has a strong interest in improving the quality of life and outcome of cancer survivors through important lifestyle interventions, including physical activity, diet, and mind-body interventions. Amy, it is so good having you be a part of this masterclass.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
So you practice what you preach. You have run the Boston Marathon now. How many times?
I've done it 11 times, and I'm training for number 12.
Amazing. Amazing. What inspired you to do that?
Well, I've been running each year for charity, and I will say I live in Boston, right near the marathon course, and it's the most exciting day in Boston each year, in my opinion. So I just love doing it. I love running for a meaningful cause. I love seeing my family, friends, and patients along the way. So I've kind of gotten hooked, for better or for worse.
Wow. And how much of an impact does exercise have on what you counsel your patients on breast cancer, on the prevention, treatment, survivorship?
Right. So I do try to practice what I preach, since I talk to all of my patients with breast cancer about the important role of physical activity. In fact, there is a whole field called exercise oncology, which is dedicated to studying the benefits of physical activity for cancer risk reduction and for individuals who have cancer, including breast cancer. So I do counsel my patients about the immense benefits. Exercise has been shown to reduce risk of breast cancer recurrence, reduce risk of mortality from breast cancer, and reduce risk of mortality for all causes. So exercise is an important intervention that should be part of every patient's treatment plan.
Yeah, amazing. And what happens in our bodies that help us defend against cancer when we exercise?
Such an important question and such a really interesting area of research. We know that when we exercise, that there are so many physiologic changes going on in our bodies that are also very important when we think about cancer. And as a breast oncologist, we can think a little bit about breast cancer. We know that hormone levels are influenced when we exercise. For example, the majority of breast cancers are driven by the female hormone estrogen, and we know that exercise does result in lowered levels of estrogen, and also improved insulin sensitivity, which we know we're learning more and more about the importance of that in terms of cancer risk and progression. Exercise also can reduce levels of inflammation in the body, augment the immune system, help us manage our weight and metabolism, improve our gut health. There's just so many interesting mechanisms by which exercise improves outcome for patients with cancer. And I think it's just a great area that we're continuing to learn more and more about.
Amazing. I remember you had shared an article with me, and this was one that had showed that just 10 minutes of exercise in newly diagnosed breast cancer patients activated immune cells, increasing total white blood cells by 29%. And natural killer cells by 130%. I love that name, natural killer.
Love that too.
And it was that the more intense the exercise, that correlated with a stronger anti-tumor effect. So essentially, good stress of exercise activated this natural ability that we have to improve breast cancer outcomes. So when you counsel your patients, what do you tell them? Like how much, what kinds?
Such a great question. And I love that you shared that study. And it's just so fascinating to, as you said, see the immune system change just by a brief bout of exercise, 10 minutes. So cool. So certainly I ask all my patients about their exercise. As you know from your practice too, some people are already super active and have a great regimen. And some people are like, I've never found something I love to do. So you obviously, as you know, meet the patient where she is. And I do try to counsel my patients on the recommendations from the American Cancer Society, American College of Sports Medicine, other organizations, that we all should aim to get at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity each week. And we talk about what that means, and an important focus on strength training at least twice a week. And that's so important for my patient population, since a lot of our treatments, chemotherapy, anti-estrogen therapies, etc., can cause decline in bone density, decreased muscle mass. So we know the strength training is absolutely so important, just like the aerobic activity. So we really have a conversation about that. And for those patients who are not really into exercise, we try to discuss how to set some SMART goals to get started on an exercise regimen, and referrals to programs either at my hospital or in the community that can help them get started.
And speaking of programs, so you have co-created one yourself, the Paving the Path to Wellness. Can you tell us a little bit about the program?
Yeah, so I'm so excited. In fact, we're about to launch our next group starting this week. So Paving the Path to Wellness is an amazing lifestyle medicine-based program that I've collaborated with Dr. Beth Frades to adapt for the breast cancer survivor or thriver population, as they like to call themselves. And we really focus on the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, but physical activity, P in paving stands for physical activity. Physical activity is one of the most important topics. I mean, they're all important, but that's a key one that we start off with, really helping share the evidence behind why physical activity is so important for breast cancer survivors, how to get started with aerobic activity, strength training, also the importance of flexibility and balance. And I love how the women in the group really support and motivate each other to make these behavior changes throughout the course of the 12-week program. So we're really excited to get started this week.
Yeah, and the program is so comprehensive, right? It incorporates like stress management, it incorporates food. And, speaking of stress, what do you see as the role of stress in cancer survivorship?
A great question. We know that distress, unfortunately, is so prevalent amongst my patient population, individuals facing a diagnosis of breast cancer or other cancers. And we really work on educating our patients about tools they can use to help manage that problem, because we know that fear of recurrence, mood changes such as anxiety, depression, just overall overwhelm is very prevalent. And we just want to help our patients learn about, the role of mindfulness-based strategies, meditation, physical activity, other strategies that they can use to help alleviate that stress, to help them cope better with their breast cancer diagnosis and proceed with their treatment. So the paving program is all encompassing because we really try to address the mind, body, and spirit, as Dr. Freitas would say.
Yeah, and it's so important to bring it all together. A lot of my patients who have gone through breast cancer treatment have done well in terms of response and, either got radiation surgery, sometimes chemotherapy, but even with really good results in terms of, essentially getting rid of the cancer, oftentimes they still don't feel good. And and then sometimes they're even released by their oncologist saying, hey, you did great, you're done. And they're like, well, why don't I feel good? Can you talk about the role of this program or lifestyle in just the recovery above and beyond that the cancer is gone or you're cured? That's a very difficult term to use. But when people just aren't themselves afterward.
Right. I mean, everything you just said really resonates with me because that is exactly what I've heard from my own patients early on in my career as a breast oncologist. A patient's finished her chemo, and let's say maybe she's going to start tamoxifen if she has an estrogen-sensitive cancer, and I give her prescription and say, we'll see you in 3 to 4 months and see how you're doing. And the patient staring back at me, deer in the headlights, like, what? I don't come back for 3 or 4 months? What's next? Like, what else? They've been getting such intense care up to that point, and it's very jarring to feel that your oncologist is just like, see you in 4 months. So that's why I really realized, we need to be doing so much more, especially with all the really impactful data coming out about, again, exercise, nutrition, stress management, the importance of addressing sleep disturbance, all of these areas that we're so familiar with as lifestyle medicine experts. And that's when I was so fortunate to start this collaboration with Dr. Freitas to develop this paving program, really with the goal to address these questions and the needs of this population who are very interested, very motivated to take charge and improve their health. And they just want all the education they can get in a community setting to help make these changes and feel so much better. And I can tell you that it's so rewarding to hear from my patients now, wow, that program gave me hope that I can move forward and has really changed my life. And I hear this all the time, and I just love it. And that's why we keep going and try to offer it to more individuals to help benefit them.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing when you're saying this is there's so many aspects around cancer and all the stress that goes with it that you can't always control. And a lot of people, when they're going through such a difficult situation, want to do something where they feel they're in control, right? Like, what can I do, as opposed to take this pill and wait and see what happens. And I love how this is all about empowerment. This is all about hope and gaining some control over the aspects of disease that we do have control over. And I love how you're saying how much of a difference that makes. When you talk about the stress, like you mentioned, breast cancer patients in general, it's such a stress. I mean, it's stress with a capital S, right? It's it's life and death. And you mentioned some stress management techniques like meditation and mindfulness. What other components in the program do you use to help people cope and manage the stress? And exercise you mentioned as well, but what are some other ones?
Right. So I love that you shared all those great examples and focusing on what are tools we can help our patients feel empowered to face their cancer diagnosis and survivorship moving forward. I love that. I would say something I've learned a lot more about since my undergraduate days, the whole field of positive psychology. Back when I was in college, by the way, I took a million classes in psychology and neuroscience. That's what I thought I was going to do with my career. And I still love it. And maybe I should go back to it, by the way. But I feel like the teachings from positive psychology are so fascinating. I'm sure you agree as well. The power of expressing gratitude and just learning the strategies to help improve mental strength and resilience. I mean, the literature is so interesting that these are things that we can all work on to improve how we cope with various stressors that are thrown our way. So we do share a lot of the science from positive psychology with the participants in the paving program. And I've learned so much, they've learned so much, and I just think that's one of the great aspects of the program, that we're able to facilitate this so that patients are now like, again, we're not Pollyanna. We know they have cancer. We know it's scary. And there are a lot of things our patients are facing. But these strategies can still be so helpful to help people cope with the uncertainty and all the challenges that come their way.
Amazing. Amazing. Amy, thank you so much for all this great information. And thank you for the tremendous contribution you make every day with the work that you do, with these programs that you create, which are at no cost, right? I mean, this is a labor of love. So thank you so much.
Thank you as well. It's wonderful to be your guest. Thank you.
And I love how Amy brings attention to exercise oncology. I'm not sure if that's a term that you've heard, but how it's so evidence-based now that every cancer patient needs to be told about the importance of exercise as part of their treatment plan, as part of reducing recurrence of cancer. So everything from prevention, as Dawn mentioned earlier, to this role in outcomes and recurrence. So key, so critical. The effect of the exercise on our hormones, inflammation, gut health was another big takeaway, and that it doesn't take much, right? The study we mentioned was 10 minutes of exercise. That alone activated our immune system's anti-tumor effect, right? Pretty amazing. And the more intense, the better. And this theme that, breast cancer patients are probably some of the most stressed patients, or cancer patients in general have some of the highest level of stress, yet no matter where you are or what you're facing, that you can build resilience and you can make such a difference in your health and in the outcome of whatever you're facing. So on that wonderful note, I want to open it up to the questions. I thank everyone who stayed with us and has been part of this masterclass. Just such a pleasure and joy to be sharing this evening with all of you. So we're going to have Sam join us back in, and you can drop your questions in the chat, and we are more than happy to take them.
So excited to dive into these questions, but I have to show the finished kimchi egg bites because you guys can get to see the end, and they look so good.
They look
Let's share them.
amazing. And Sam, one question that came up in the chat is the coupon code that you provided, that's good for the whole week?
Yep, it'll be good until the end of the week, so the end of Sunday. And you guys can use it for $100 off the annual plan. Yep.
Fantastic. So we're going to jump into some questions. So this one is from Kelsey. And as someone with ulcerative colitis, one of the autoimmune diseases, and that just popped off the screen. Okay. That she treats, this must be, when Dr. Chutkan was talking, it's really interesting to hear about the need for fiber. It's such a misconception that those of us fell back off with Crohn's and colitis need to have, I wonder if I can't see the rest of that question.
Maybe Jonathan can drop into us on the
Oh, need to avoid. I assume need to avoid fiber. I'm not sure if I caught that whole question. I need to avoid fiber. Can you say more on that? Sure. I'm happy to take that, or Sam, do you want to take that one?
You can dive into it.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that to balance your gut immune system, which is what Dr. Chutkan was talking about, part of that is really how you optimize the immune system. So you hear so much, and Robynne talks about this all the time, that everyone's out there saying, oh, you've got to boost the immune system. And she's like, no, you don't want to boost the immune system, because the immune system really has two functions. So one is to improve our immune response to bacteria, viruses. That part of the immune system, you do want to have a strong response. But the immune system is also a key part of autoimmune disease. And when our immune system is boosted, or if it's overreacting, that is, when it's recognizing our own body as foreign, that's what leads to 1 out of 4 people getting these autoimmune diseases. And the goal in balancing this gut microbiome is fiber. I mean, you've heard that from Robynne, you heard it from Will. When we have diversity of fiber from different food sources, we're helping different strains of gut bacteria. We're creating that diversity, which is what we need to produce the short chain fatty acids that they both talked about, which are such a key part of keeping our immune system regulated. So you want to increase fiber. And part of how you do that, if you're not one that eats a lot right now, and as Will said, 95% of people in America right now aren't eating the recommended amount of fiber, you can't suddenly introduce it. I mean, I think this is what gets people into trouble, where they'll, go and eat a big salad or some beans, and they haven't done that in a while. And of course, the gut protests, because we as humans don't break down the fiber. Our gut bacteria are doing all that work. They have the enzymes to do it, or the capability to ferment it, I should say. And if we don't have that gut bacterial population, so if we haven't eaten the fiber that's in, say, a black bean in a long time, and we suddenly eat a lot of it, well, we don't have that gut bacterial population built up in our gut. So we have a really hard time digesting that particular type of food. So what Will was saying is, really think of this as building a muscle, right? Like, you don't just go to the gym and lift 20 pounds or 40 pounds. You go and you may start with 5 pounds, and then you work your way up to 10 pounds. And you want to do the same when you introduce foods that are high in fiber, because again, you and I as humans don't have the enzyme to break down fiber. We're depending on our gut bacteria. And every food that we're eating has a different type of fiber. So the fiber in a black bean is different than in a tomato, and it's different in a celery. And we need to give our gut time to build the bacterial strains to break down all these foods. So you do want the fiber, but you just want to introduce it slowly, and you want diversity of fiber. Aiming for at least 30 or more plant food a week is the general guideline. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Sam.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's so well said. And on Mindful, we do have a lot of members that suffer from various different autoimmune diseases. And it is because they're searching for creative ways to start to incorporate some of these foods and this diversity into their diet, and the importance of that, and finding, like I said, creative ways to have fun in the kitchen and incorporate these foods and build up that tolerance. I know, Dr. Sharon, you've come on and chatted with a number of our members, and we've had the same questions come up. Why do I have, this reaction in particular with beans, and in particular with legumes? And it is about building your tolerance and your body's ability to actually digest it properly, having that diversity, and doing so in different ways, that your body can then get all the benefits from it. So having a creative way in the kitchen to incorporate these makes it fun as well. I think sometimes following some type of protocol makes it kind of boring, and you get disengaged from it, and it feels like a chore, instead of having the fun with it, and maybe starting small, right? And that's where, not necessarily following a measurement from a recipe becomes a little bit more food freedom, so that you can incorporate it knowing what you're up against and what you've been used to having. So, you have to use a little bit of your common sense mixed with your own experience, while also trying to build up that resistance for digestion.
Okay, so regarding time-restricted eating recommendation to start with the sun, end with the sun, some studies show time-restricted eating is effective regardless of when we start. So thoughts. So I'll start with my thoughts, and then Sam, if you want to add anything, you can certainly add. So there are really two parts to this question, because one part is time-restricted eating, and then the other part is when it is optimal to create that eating window. So the time restricted eating, there's a clear benefit because our body is either in buildup mode or breakdown mode. We cannot be in both. And generally, when we are eating, we are in buildup phase. And we need to balance both. I mean, growth sounds really great that we can always be in this growth mode, but when we're out of balance, we don't spend enough time breaking down the glucose and the fats that we're storing. And that can lead to an imbalance and tilt the table towards metabolic diseases and things like diabetes, prediabetes, fatty liver, the things that Will was talking about. So trying to eat in a window that's 12 hours or less is clearly optimal for human health. I refer to it as normal eating. I know it's called time-restricted eating, but that's really just taking what's old and giving it a new term. It's how humans ate throughout our history, and this is the first time in human history that we have access to food round the clock, and it's really harming us. And the second part is, well, then what's that optimal timing of that window? And this is really touching on our circadian biology and how to optimize it. And we know that our body is primed to digest food better earlier in the day. And by evening, our insulin levels go down. So as melatonin rises, our insulin level goes down. So if you're eating the same food, but later in the day, that food will lead to a bigger spike in your blood sugar. So when you look at studies on time-restricted eating, definitely people who have a window that's earlier in the day, we see lower levels of oxidative stress, better insulin resistance, lower blood pressure. An amazing clinical trial showed quite a difference in even blood pressure. When that window is in the middle of the day, we see a lot of the same benefits. But when that time-restricted eating window is towards the latter end of the day, we don't see all the same metabolic benefits. So it's definitely better to try and have your window earlier in the day. And if you're one that just doesn't like breakfast, like honestly, I'm not much of a breakfast eater. I tend to start my meals a little later in the day, and I don't like to eat when I'm not hungry. But even though my window is kind of a mid to late day window, I try to have most of my calories when I do start eating. So I make lunch like a really big meal. I try and eat kind of later afternoon, eat something else that's fairly substantial. So in the evening, I'm not just going home from work starving and eating a big dinner. So I try and keep it really light. So it's okay to have a slightly shifted window if you're still trying to get the majority of your calories on the earlier end of that eating window. And Sam, if there's anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think we have very similar philosophies of this. I agree with, aiming for a 12-hour window. And again, that's going to depend on your individual lifestyles and what time you're waking up, when you're going to bed, and when you actually do need that energy to support you throughout the day as well. I think will vary. I've heard, and this was something that I suffered from as well, just like not being hungry in the morning, not wanting to have something. But of course, there are ways to sort of train your body and start getting into an earlier habit, the same like sleep and anything else. And one thing that we have on Mindful that's been crucial in my own balancing of my nutrition throughout the day and getting protein in the morning is having something like a starter, which is what we call it, which is kind of like a snack before breakfast, which gives your body the opportunity to get a little bit of a protein boost or healthy fats, potentially, depending on what it is. That could be as simple as like a hard-boiled egg, or a handful of raw almonds before you're going to the gym if you're not hungry, which we hear from so many women in particular, trying to get more balanced hormones. And so that does really help support you in balancing your hormones and getting back onto that regular sort of schedule if you're noticing that your body is, or you've been in the habit of eating heavier meals towards the end of your day, like Dr. Sharon has commented on here. So that's kind of a way to start to train your body. And then you'll also begin to, be a little bit hungrier early on. And then you can look at having your breakfast, even if it's, between 10 and 12. If you're a later eater, you've had something within, an hour or two of waking up. I usually try to aim for an hour and would suggest that. But if you're going to the gym, having protein before to support for energy is really going to be important. And then after to help with muscle recovery. So I just think that's like been a really big game changer for us, and just helping. And one last thing I just want to add in regards to the time window is also giving yourself the opportunity to fully digest before bed. And that's another thing that can really disrupt in your sleep if you have not fully digested your food and broken it down before going to bed. So again, that's where I say consider your individual lifestyle, because if you are somebody who's staying up really, really late, but you're trying to follow the natural circadian rhythm of the sun or the season, that might be different. If you're somebody like me who it's getting to bedtime, I'm usually going to bed between, 10 or so. I really want to make sure that I've finished and fully digested. So really 3 to 4 hours before is going to be an ideal time frame to actually digest. So think about your ideal bedtime and then work backwards, which might also help you.
That's great. We're both early to bed, early to rise people. So how do you differentiate between acute and chronic stress? So I will answer that by saying, so acute stress is short term, it's brief. It is generally followed by a recovery period. So I think of stress as anything that challenges your body. I think of it very broadly, not just psychologically or emotionally. I think of exercise as a form of stress, of plant-based foods as a form of stress, heat, cold. I mean, there's so many ways that we can stress our bodies. Time-restricted eating is a form of stress because it gives our body exposure to food scarcity. But these stressors are generally brief, and then we're going to take away the stress, right? So it's for a short period of time. Chronic stress is continuous. It just goes on for a prolonged amount of time. Things like financial hardship, difficult work situations, bad relationships. These are things that are not easily resolved, and they're such a common part of the stress in our lives today. The challenge with chronic stress, though, is that we can't always control it. We can't always avoid these chronic stressors. And one of the themes in the stress paradox is that when we introduce our bodies to these brief intermittent stressors, we're microdosing stress and building resilience, just like a muscle. And that helps us really deal and handle some of these chronic stressors that we can't always control. So it's a different set of tools to help manage the stress in our life. And one of the themes that we've heard tonight is how action is the antidote to anxiety, how taking control is such an important part of dealing with stress. And the stress paradox and good stress is all about taking control and action. So our bodies are adapted for these short spikes of stress. We grow from them. Our bodies are not adapted for these chronic continuous stressors. So that's roughly how I differentiate the two. And anything you want to add, Sam?
No, I think you're the pro on stress. The only thing I would maybe jump in and say is, think of food also as a stressor when we're talking about nutrition, because you can create chronic stress from eating disruptive ingredients or high processed sugars, processed foods. You're creating chronic stress continually on your gut and your digestive system. So we have to consider that as well. I know you talk about this so much, but just for our listeners here tonight, as one thing that goes off, are you stressing and adding that chronic stress by choice?
Right. Absolutely. That's chapter 1. I love it. Okay. Gastroenterologists often say to eliminate fibrous and fermented foods. Dr. B says the opposite. I struggle to know which is right. What is the easiest way to start adding these back? So, Sam, I'll let you start with this one because you already started talking about that. And I will maybe add something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've heard so much today, but just adding diversity back into your diet and starting, small, letting your body build a tolerance to being able to digest certain foods is going to be really powerful. And most importantly is mindful eating and paying attention to how foods feel for you. If you are trying to reintegrate something, and I apologize, my puppy is crying. If you're trying to reintegrate something into your diet and your routine, taking a journal or paying attention to how something feels, or documenting that process can sometimes help you bring a little bit more mindfulness into the actual act of trying to see how it feels, and maybe learning that that's too much or that still doesn't agree with you. And it gives you an option to look at a whole experience with your foods. Again, finding ways that are fun in the kitchen and just having a creative, fun experience with your meals, not making it an added stress, but instead making it a fun. Incorporate your family in cooking, get everybody into it and say, how do these foods feel for you? How are we experiencing this together? I think we need to bring back the romantic appeal to nutrition, as opposed to, continuously thinking about what is this doing for me in a negative or positive way, and just bring a little bit more experimenting back into building our whole plates.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, one of the paradoxes here is that people for whom it's the hardest to add the fiber are the people who need it the most. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
true of really the stress paradox. And just acknowledging that, we're all at a different starting point. I mean, the goal is really just to do a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And that's how we get to that
Mm-hmm.
end point. And even if it's hard, if you continue with food restriction, you really wipe out that part of your gut bacteria. It just makes it harder down the road. So just as Will was saying, if you have a knee injury, of course you don't want to walk on your knee. It's hard to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, all the muscles in your leg get weak. And that's what you're trying to avoid. You have to think of these unintended consequences that happen. So you want to slowly rehabilitate. And it's going to hurt at first, but you're going to be able to function really well with that knee
Mm-hmm.
when all is said and done. And that's really where the power is. Okay, if the best approach to food sensitivities is to go low and slow with these healthy plant foods, then does it make sense to follow a food elimination diet, like a low FODMAP diet? Do you want to start with that, Sam, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion with food sensitivities is always, again, mindful eating, paying attention to how it reacts in your body. I think when we talk about an elimination diet, it's very, in my opinion, and I've always expressed this, it's very difficult, and it can be a lot of stress, again, in a negative way. It can add, sometimes there's a lot of lack of clarity on what's actually causing things through an elimination diet, because you're cutting out so much and then you're slowly adding things back in, but you're not quite sure what it was. And that's usually been, a lot of our community's experience with elimination diets as a whole. So I think like the best thing that you can really do is paying attention to individual ingredients and patterns that you're seeing. So reintegrating things slow, like we said, is going to be a great way. Starting small, increasing your digestive tolerance to specific ingredients, but also recognizing that we have to look at the ingredients, which I spoke about when we're talking about cooking. And sometimes people isolate individual foods without actually recognizing that it's not that food, it's sometimes the ingredients within that food. I made the example of kimchi, and a lot of kimchis have additional cane sugar, and that may, create your blood sugar spike. You might have different reactions. You might say that that's not working for you, but the reality is it's the hidden ingredients in things. And that's where we need to take a look at, is it what you're actually having, or is it the hidden ingredients? The same goes for dairy products or nut products. We have to really pay attention to how things are packaged and processed as well in that same thing process of that. The only thing I'll add there is when it comes to legumes, because I know that's very sensitive for a lot of people with anything like chickpeas or white beans, things like that. Again, it comes down to how it's packaged. So the best thing you can do is get the ones that are raw, that you're cooking at home. But obviously most of us are getting them canned because it's much easier. Fully rinsing them because they are sitting in a preservative film when they're in the can. So sometimes we're having different reactions because it's the way things are packaged and additional ingredients, and not just that ingredients. Of course, it's common that most of us, want to build up a tolerance to beans and legumes, but it's not how it's the sort of method to how it's being delivered to us oftentimes in North America versus the actual ingredients as well that we're building this sort of intolerance to.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll add, and Sam already said it so beautifully, but elimination diets can be a good asset short term. It's just not a good long-term strategy. So it's not a clear black and white answer to that question. It does make sense for a lot of people to do some elimination diets or a low FODMAP diet, especially if the gut is just so injured. And then part of kind of getting it back to that healing, as Dr. Will said, it's healing and then growth, right? So you first want to heal and then grow, and your gut can grow new capabilities. So short-term elimination has a place. So I think that was our last question that we're going to take tonight. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us. It's been incredible having this amazing turnout, all the people who've joined, the interactions that you guys have had, the questions. We so appreciate you spending your evening with us. And one reminder, the Stress Paradox, it comes out a week from today. So please help support this amazing book launch, and please pre-order so you can get the bonuses, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think when the book is out in the real world.
We're so excited. This is such a hot topic. Dr. Sharon, you did such a great job, and everybody go buy her book. This is such an amazing resource to have. And I love that you take people through different labs that they can do. There's so much there. So it's such a great resource to have with you and support you through your journey of healing, supporting your gut, and healthy, long lives.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.